Hello students, welcome to Rao's IAS. Today let us discuss an important question asked by UPSC in the mains examination. And this question carries 10 marks under the section of polity and governance. So the question asked was compare and contrast. Look at the term used in the question. Compare and contrast the British and Indian approaches to parliamentary sovereignty. Now, to answer this question on parliamentary sovereignty, we need to understand as to how parliamentary sovereignty is being practiced in India, of course, and also in Britain. Now, to answer this question on parliamentary sovereignty, there are certain things which we must understand. First of all, is the fact that in India we have a written constitution, whereas in Britain they do not have a written constitution. And since we have a written constitution, hence we follow the principle of constitutional supremacy rather than parliamentary sovereignty. And as we all know that our written constitution inherently also contains the element of constitutionalism. So, this idea of constitutionalism, which is inherent in the provisions of the Constitution, effectively limits the power of various organs of the government, including the parliament. Now, at the same time, we also have judiciary, which has the power of judicial review, particularly under Article 13 and also Article 368. Because under Article 13, it is the power of judiciary to check whether any legislation passed by the parliament, whether it violates any of the fundamental rights or not. And accordingly, writ petitions can be filed in the Supreme Court under Article 32 and in the respective high courts under Article 226. So there is judicial independence as well with respect to the aspect of judicial review. And this element of judicial review has further enabled the Supreme Court or the higher judiciary, or we can say the constitutional courts, to further interpret various provisions of the Constitution. Now, when we talk about Britons, they do not have a written constitution, and rather they have various legislation, statutes, precedents, rules, or conventions. And any enactment passed by British Parliament cannot be reviewed either by the judiciary or by the executive. And this is what is exactly the meaning of parliamentary sovereignty. So, parliamentary sovereignty, as it is practiced in Britain, we do not follow the similar concept of parliamentary sovereignty. Now, this issue of parliamentary sovereignty was recently in news when the Vice President of India highlighted the basic structure doctrine judgment and rather question its legality, stating that parliamentary sovereignty is supreme. And that can be said to be the current genesis to this question. So the topic here is theme or sub-theme from UPSC syllabus. This question was asked. Clearly, this question was asked from the comparison aspect of the Indian Constitution with that of others. Possible reason for asking this question. It highlights that Vice President highlighted the issue of parliamentary sovereignty vis-a-vis the power of judiciary to review the amending powers of parliament under Article 368. And if you look at the DNS, that is Daily News Simplified, dated 13th January, this particular topic was clearly discussed, where the topic highlighted or the news mentioned was under Constitution, law declared by the Supreme Court is binding on all. And the context was the statement given by the Vice President, where he questioned the legality of Kesavananda Bharati judgment and NGAC verdict. So, in this DNS, this aspect of parliamentary sovereignty as practiced in Britain and India was discussed, and also it was highlighted that however in India we have constitutional supremacy, which provides checks and balance on the amending powers of parliament. And Article 141 of the Indian Constitution makes the judgments pronounced by the Supreme Court binding on all courts within the territory of India. So these two provisions makes it clear that we have constitutional supremacy rather than having parliamentary supremacy or sovereignty. Now this topic, since it was covered on 13th January 2023. Hence, it was followed in the Focus magazine of February, where we discussed the same topic regarding parliamentary sovereignty versus constitutional sovereignty. And we also provided a comparison between parliamentary sovereignty and constitutional sovereignty or constitutional supremacy with respect to India and Britain. So, coming to the answer, since this question is asking about compare and contrast, so we can start by saying that according to the principle of parliamentary sovereignty as practiced in Britain, Parliament is the supreme lawmaking authority and no institution can set aside its laws in Britain. However, this principle is not followed in India due to the established norm of constitutional supremacy. So, at the introduction itself, we have bifurcated this concept along with explaining the concept of parliamentary sovereignty and also stating the fact that India, we do not exactly follow the parliamentary sovereignty or supremacy as practiced in Britain. Now, since this question is asking about comparison and contrast, hence in the body part of the answer, we have provided this comparison and contrast. Now, talking about parliamentary sovereignty in Britain, strengthened through unwritten constitution, which largely comprises of various legislation or statutes, precedents, rules, conventions, etc. Whereas in India, strengthened due to written constitution and ethics of constitutionalism, which acts as check on parliament, and constitution is also a reflection of people's will. Further, the Indian constitution also provides certain checks and balance through Article 13, as it expressly bars parliament from enacting laws which curb fundamental rights. Federal provisions, as parliament cannot enact legislations on state subjects, and also expanded by the basic structure doctrine, which limits parliament's constituent power under Article 368 of the Indian Constitution. Whereas talking about parliamentary sovereignty, no checks and balances on parliament, as judiciary or executive cannot set aside an act of parliament. So this is exactly the difference between parliamentary sovereignty as practiced in Britain and constitutional supremacy as practiced in India. And as our conclusion, we can highlight that there are many similarities in parliamentary functioning of India and Britain, but India, because of a written constitution, ensured legitimate check on unbridled powers of the parliament through an independent judiciary, thereby enacting or inculcating the values of constitutionalism. So this becomes your complete answer, as this is a part of your introduction. This forms a part of your body, and this becomes your conclusion. And this entire answer has been written in 177 words. Thank you very much.